Yes, so I just wanted to also say something about like how did I arrive at all of this, all the stuff I'm going to present to you in these 4 sessions. Well, in somewhere in the background, this is based on a material by somebody called Lama Tilman. Tilman used to be called Lama Lundrup. He's a Tibetan teacher, a German person, but he's Tibetan teacher, and he does have a lot of ties with people in the Triratna movement, like for instance Vasantra and Vijayamala have done their 3-year retreat under his supervision, as it were. So he has a lot of ties with our movement, but he, of course, in his turn, bases his work on his tradition, the Tibetan Kagyu tradition. And there is a text in this Tibetan tradition which is called The Poison in the Peacock Grove. The image of the peacock is, I hope, maybe familiar with you from the Buddhist tradition, but particularly in the Tibetan tradition, there seems to be this idea that peacocks would eat poisonous plants, and then when they're eating the poisonous plants, it turns into beauty. How amazing is that? So it turns into, Anyway, you don't have to describe that to you. So this is this image for what might happen if we engage with the difficult emotions. It turns into something beautiful. So that's the idea. So this Peacock in the Poison Grove is a text which comes from a whole body of text, which is called the Lojong tradition. I think some of you might have heard about that. And Lojong, a lot of you might know the 8 verses from Mind Training Verses, or the 7-point Mind Training. I've done a lot of teaching myself in that field. So this is one of the Lojongs. So the steps that I'm going through are based somewhere on those steps from that tradition. But also because I've been teaching around this material for a number of years now. From the beginning of the lockdown, I've done 1 session a week about this material for the West London Buddhist Centre. But before that, I've done quite a number of courses on this material for the West London Buddhist Centre. And after that, I turned it into a mindfulness course. I've actually taught this stuff as mindfulness course in a hospital, for hospital staff in London. So I've done quite a lot of teaching on it. So I've got a lot of other material that I arranged around all of that, material from the Theravada tradition, the earlier Buddhist tradition, and also maybe some material from more mindfulness type of science, neuroscience kind of material. So just wanted to say that just before we start, so you kind of roughly know where all of this that we're going to talk about comes from. And I think that's me done with my introductory bits. Okay, I think we'll just go, I'm just going to take a second to settle in a bit more, because I'm going to speak about a definition. Where do we start with this? So what actually do we mean by difficult emotion, or emotion even? So I thought that would be a good place to start. So I'm going to settle in a bit more, because I'm noticing I don't feel comfortable in my posture. So I'm inviting you to do the same. So, if you need to do a bit of settling in, a bit of like, it's not we're going to meditate, but maybe just be a bit more comfortable. That's what I'd like to do. I'm also a bit cold. And I also noticed I'm not wearing my kesa. So yeah, these are good moments to reflect. They always ask me to wear my kesa. And I've got a lovely blanket here. A friend sent to me for my birthday. So that was last week, I think. I found the post had brought this package, and a friend had sent me this shawl. It's just so lovely. So I have to wear it, obviously. Okay, I'm kind of settled. Hope you are too. So let's make a start. So you'll hear quite a bit of me, but hopefully that is only the first session. That we'll do some more. Also do a bit of meditation. I did forget that. We do 15 minutes meditation, or maybe a bit more in later sessions. We'll have to see. Okay, and now I said I was going to start, but now I'm going to ask you to start. I'm going to ask you just to write down, on your piece of paper any emotions that you're having at the moment or you've been having since you woke up this morning. Just write some emotions down. Nobody's going to look. That's the advantage of us being all on Zoom. Everybody's can just do this in their own space. Nobody needs to know necessarily. So any emotions that you've been aware of, and so we're just listing them. We don't need to kind of go into them. We're just writing them down plain. And obviously we've got this whole wide range of emotion. It could be huge, massive range of emotion from subtle to strong. Yeah, so just bringing our awareness and mindfulness to any, be it positive or more challenging or maybe neutral emotions. Who knows what kind of emotions you've had today? There's like a million emotions between us all, probably, but they're all human, and probably each of us can completely empathize with each other's emotion. So now just I hope you've noted some. Maybe for those of you who would like to share, maybe you could just put like maximum of 3 in the chat. That would be really lovely to get a sense of the emotion that has been experienced today by the people in the room. So a maximum of 3 if you are happy to share. And you don't have to share the ones you don't want to share, but it will be lovely to hear of you. So thanks so much for those of who share. Just to get into territory of what are we talking about here, the whole range of things, which I'm sure is vast. So we've got fear, guilt, low self-worth. It's horrible, isn't it, to feel that? Sadness, worry, joy. We've got some positive here, internal joy, anxiety. We've got trepidation, blank. Yeah, that's an interesting one as well. They're all incredibly interesting, I find. Interest. It's lovely actually to actually flag that up as emotion. I think you're right. I think there is an emotional quality to that. Irritation, calm, happy, excited. That sounds lovely. Calm, relaxed, a bit anxious. Confusion, wonder, excited, restless, grounded, joy. Oh, and also the reasons with it. Wow. Okay. So isn't that amazing, that in itself, just to see that all of these different emotions are going on. And we got more coming. Great. So yes, of course, there, I've seen mixtures. I've seen some people who had what you could say difficult emotions. All 3 of them were that, and some of them had like more positive emotions mixed in or more neutral emotions mixed in. I think this is really where our work in terms of the befriending the difficult emotions starts, with just becoming much, much more mindful of all these emotions that are passing through. And this has a lot of positive consequences. But one of them as well is that when we start flagging the emotions more, we also notice that there's joy, and there's kindness, there's openness. We feel relaxed. We might feel at peace. I think we often don't really pay enough attention to when these more beautiful emotions are also coming around, that's a tendency we'll talk about later on, the tendency of the brain to do that, just to focus on the more challenging, frightening or threatening parts of our emotional life. So here is really something, the mindfulness of the emotions is really something that we need to train ourselves in much more, to the extent we haven't done this yet. But this is one of the invitations for the course, and some of the home practices around this. So I'd like to also say at this point, like, why I don't want to use negative emotion. I think negative emotion there's some sort of judgment in it. I don't find it particularly helpful to call our emotions negative if they're difficult. I think difficult or challenging feels much more helpful to describe what is going on, because the negative also starts to feel like you want to push them away, and that's not really something that is going to help us. So here we are. There is also a difference between how Buddhism regards emotion and how Western psychology is regarding difficult emotions. So here we've got this word, an English word, emotion, and if we look at what it actually means, it means that something that sets the mind in motion. So if you go to a dictionary, that's what you would find, something that sets the mind in motion. But of course, Buddhism, and the Buddha didn't speak English, and he didn't use this word emotion. So this word emotion, in terms of what we're looking at, isn't that helpful for us working with the difficult emotions. So in Buddhist terms, you could say it's something that conditions the mind and makes it adopt a certain perspective or a vision of things. I'll repeat that, and I'll also put that in the email for you tomorrow. Something that conditions the mind and makes it adopt a certain perspective or vision of things. So that's a Buddhist definition of this phenomenon that we call emotion. And it doesn't have to be a burst, it could be quite subtle. So we saw that, I think, in the chat. There's all these different variations. And I think often in our Western way of looking at it, which we can't help, we see emotion as something that is quite strong, but it can be incredibly subtle as well. So that's what we're also looking at in our work, trying to see what is going on. There's subtle varieties and there's much more strong varieties. So that the mind being emotion could be strong and could be less strong. And then you could say that the word we could use for difficult emotions in our work, in the course and in Buddhism, is the word klesha. And some of you might have heard that word already. So it's the word klesha. And that's a Sanskrit word, by the way. And there's also a word in Pali that is called kilesa. It's the same word, but spelled differently. And these are mental states that cloud the mind and manifest in unwholesome actions. It's actually just a definition I found on Wikipedia, but I found it very helpful. So there are mental states that cloud the mind and manifest in unwholesome actions. So that's the translation of this word klesha. So we've seen all these different examples of emotions in the chat. It could be anxiety, fear, anger, jealousy, depression. All of that, you could say, is in that area of the kleshas. And some of the synonyms, I think sometimes it's really helpful to have some synonyms. So here's a list. You could say afflictions for this word klesha, afflictions, or defilements, You've got to be a bit careful sometimes with these words, because, you know, we don't want this sort of like defilements, like there's something horrible about it, or there's something about it that isn't allowed, or anyway, defilements. Destructive emotions is another way of approaching it, or disturbing emotions, or mind poisons. Well, we got this, the poison in the peacock grove was already had that word poison in it, but that might help as well, the poisons. So we're talking about emotions that are harmful for ourselves and others, and that, you know, that we feel that, don't we? When we feel them, they just don't feel pleasant at all. They just feel like horrible most of the time, don't they? So it's, yeah, they're harmful for ourselves and for others. And so you could then contrast those destructive emotions or kilesas to the positive emotions. And I'll say a bit more about that now. In terms of the kilesas, the destructive emotions, they prevent the mind from ascertaining result as it is. I'm quoting this from a book. I'll let you know tomorrow. So it prevents the mind from ascertaining result as it is. And there is a gap between how things actually are. We know that term from Buddhism, don't we? How things really are, and how we perceive them. So the idea here is that this word obscuration means that the mind is somehow clouded, and things as they really are, some sort of like how things really are, is obstructed by the emotion, really. The difficult emotion, the destructive emotion, causes us to, it's like a distortion. So that is incredibly interesting. So when we are in a difficult emotion, we can just rely on it, that things seem to just distorted just because of this state is in the mind at that particular time. It means that we don't perceive things clearly. So that is something to let sink in, isn't it? I think that's quite interesting. So if you then contrast that to what's known as the constructive emotions, you get a whole host of emotions that we know from Buddhism, that are the qualities that we aspire to. So you get like compassion and generosity and benevolence and respect. So you get all these positive emotions, and somehow under the influence of these positive emotions, the mind comes much closer to how things really are than under the influence of the difficult emotions. How is that? I find that it's just incredible. So in itself, I think there's a lot of benefit in realizing that when the difficult emotion is going on, that at that moment you don't see things clearly. So that in itself, I think, is incredibly, incredibly helpful, particularly because we know that under the influence of the difficult emotions, we often act in ways that aren't that helpful for ourselves and others. So knowing that at that moment we don't see things clearly, there is a distortion going on, that might just sort of give you a bit more motivation not to allow that emotion to spill out, as it were, into some sort of act of it could be writing or word, or it could be speech or any kind of physical utterance, as it were. So, and then you could just broadly say that, the acting from the difficult emotion does always lead to less happiness, less well-being, less lucidity, and more distortion. And then on the other side, with the positive emotion, more happiness, more well-being, more clarity, and less distortion. So that's a very simple sort of division there. And if anyone starts to feel bad about themselves at this point, please don't. Please don't. This is really not what it's about. I find this is just an incredibly optimistic type of way of looking at things, because we know that under the influence of the difficult emotion, there's a distortion, but we also know that it's completely possible for that to pass through, and for the brightness and the open spaces and the non-distortion to come up, if you see what I mean, because that is just bound to happen, especially when we're practicing. So you could say that positive emotion is in sound reason, and then also as Buddhist, we've got this ideal of enlightenment. So the idea is that in this state of enlightenment, we would be free from these defilements. But anyway, that's a bit far on the horizon, isn't it? But it's a lovely way to know that this is actually possible. It really is possible, and it's a journey. It is really a journey, that. So he talks about obscuration, and you could say that these kleshas are actually equal to what we call suffering. I'll say a bit more about that later on. So you could say that these kleshas, they're obscuring a natural, spontaneous flow of energy that is the positive emotion. So you could think about them as blockages or obscurations. And then this is why I had this title for the course, the clouds in the sky behind the cloud. So behind those clouds, we always find a clear and open sky. And so we know that when the obscurations, when the difficult emotions are coursing through our being, as it were, they're obscuring this open sky, this spontaneous flow of creativity and emotion. So just to know that. So it is not, I think this is really different from other ways of looking at this, and maybe other religious traditions, other philosophical traditions. The idea is really that the natural state is positive emotion here. And that is actually what we're doing in the practice. We're finding our way back to this basic natural state. And we know that this basic natural state is possible because we have had experiences of it in our lifetime. So experiences of being in flow, experience of being incredibly happy and open and spacious. So we know that this is possible for us. Maybe I hope for you, you might remember it now, but maybe if you think about it a bit more, you might come across them. Maybe you're in it right now. That would be fantastic too, wouldn't it? So this is completely possible to go back to it. It's not like it's lost. It's just like waiting behind the clouds, as it were, this open state. So in that sense, I love that way of looking at it. So we're using the tools of the Dharma to come back to this natural state, to do some clearing of blockages, as it were. So, and another thing that occurs to me as well, that with this image of the sky and the clouds, is even if we are in the difficult emotion, there's always some sort of glimpse of what might be behind. Always sort of some sort of glimpse of, maybe there might be a glimpse of beauty or a glimpse of openness, or maybe, you know, most of your mind and body feels like incredibly horrible and cramped, but there might be like a bit here and there that feels open and that feels relaxed, which is like that glimpse. There's something to that promises us that we can go back to it. Let me see how I'm doing with the time. I've just done this time schedule and I'm like right on time. I just can't believe myself, but yeah. Anyway, so you could just say, and this is something that I'll also send to you tomorrow. I found this in, this is the Dalai Lama actually saying this. So he's sort of summarizing what I've just said. So you could say that firstly, all the destructive emotions and mental states are essentially distorted. And the antidote, so he calls antidotes these positive emotions like joy and compassion and insight, are undistorted and based on how things really are. So that's our first point that we talked about with this definition. And then he's saying the antidotes have the quality of being strengthened through training and practice. So through our training, the Dharma training, we're strengthening those positive qualities, which is just such a I just sort of feel relief. Just relief that this is possible in this way, and that there is a path. There are these tools to do this. And then he's saying the essential nature of the mind is pure and undefiled by the destructive emotions. Well, that's our definition. So here we've got our definition, and a bit more than the definition maybe. So I think what I'd like to do now is we just do a short meditation that I'll guide us through. And if you do have any questions, do maybe write them down for the moment, and we can address them in the breakout groups, or we can address them a bit later on, unless there's a question that is so strong for you right now that you want to express it right now before you meditate. Doesn't look like it. Okay. Just see what's in the chat here. Okay. Yeah, so we started off with our definition. I'll now guide us through some meditation, and then after that I'll just have a few more minutes of summarizing, and then we'll have a break. Yeah. So let's just find a posture that works for you to meditate in for 15 minutes or so. So if you would like to close your eyes, that would be what I recommend, but you don't have to, obviously. You could also lower the gaze just to have less visual impressions coming in. I'm just starting by feeling that body on the chair, just feeling that contact with the body, knowing we're here, we're sitting, even if we're miserable. Just let us take this moment to look after ourselves and our emotions. And maybe right now, just feeling the body, maybe noticing any tension in the body. We might not change anything with noting it, but it's good to know if there's any holding, any tension in the body, and just allowing that to be here. We're bringing to the meditation this quality of kindness, or at least acceptance, or respect for whatever we find in our experience. It might be difficult to experience whatever it is that you're experiencing, but we could bring some curiosity to it. approaching the meditation as an exploration, maybe even a journey. So whatever sensations we're finding in the body, approaching them with this sense of openness, and if that isn't possible, just maybe a willingness to be here, a willingness to stick around. You could also say a sense of solidarity with whatever is going on in that body right now. And there might be a tendency to want to push away. I really invite you to, if that comes up, to see if that could be relaxed. And if some sort of interest or curiosity could come up. We could just encourage ourselves to be with our experience. Feel our way into it. And if you feel anything in the body, any tension, you could also get a bit more precise about it, like, where do I feel this in the body? What does it feel like? And now also noticing what kind of thoughts are coming up. I'll just have to wait maybe a second or two before any thought will come when you invite them to come, but they'll come. So bringing our attention to that area, the realm of the thoughts. And it could be thoughts about what we're doing, thoughts about emotion, thoughts about whatever is going on, the body, the world, your life. But just let's see if we can look at the thoughts and see them as thoughts clearly, knowing here is a thought. Could be thought about a sound or thought about a sensation, a memory. And again, maybe getting a sense of solidarity support, respect for whatever thought appears. And maybe this just doesn't work for you, and that's also fine. That's just how it is. But then you could still observe that with curiosity, perhaps. And from the realm of thoughts going into the realm of emotion. Finding in your experience any emotion that's around for you right now, or mood. There's always an emotion going on, that's the idea. It could be numbness, if you don't find any, or a sense of being at ease, or some sort of anxiety, or a mix of things. So let's just see what's here right now in the realm of the emotion. A sense of gladness, or feeling relieved, apprehensive. And maybe if you don't feel an emotion, there might be an emotion about that, like, oh no, or bewilderment, confusion. It's all in the realm of the emotion. Any emotion around the practice that we're doing. And if we find any emotion, we could just clearly, as clear as possible right now for us, observe them. And if any thoughts are leading you away from the practice, also maybe observe if there might be an emotion there, and then that's something to explore there, then that emotion. So we're, as it were, examining the emotion, and then also inviting you, if you found an emotion, or whenever you find one or two, see if you can feel it in the body. If you find an emotion, whatever it is, irritation, apprehension, elation, joy, where do we feel that in the body? Do we feel it in the body? Can we be a bit more precise about that? We don't need to pin it down, but getting a sense of a location perhaps in the body for that emotional resonance, that imprint. So just letting go of any attempts to focus on emotion or thought or body. Just inviting you just sit without any attempts, any efforts for another minute before we finish this explorative meditation. Just sitting with whatever is here. We don't need to know what it is or where it is. So I thought I'd guide us through this as a way of pointing to the kind of work we can do with the difficult emotion and the positive emotion, to train ourselves to explore them and to turn towards them as with curiosity and this spirit of wanting to know them more deeply. You could even say, use that word, befriending, because this is what I've called in my notes, I've called this the middle way, and there's much more to the middle way. I'm not particularly pointing at that the whole path of Buddhism, but I'm talking about the middle way between getting either caught up in the emotion, completely entangled, caught up to the extent that there is no mindfulness anymore, no awareness anymore. And you know, we've all been there. That's just kind of happening to us most of the time, isn't it? We're just so wrapped, we're just so immersed in the emotion that it does seem like there just seems like they're kind of, it's gotten hold of us somehow. We're steeped into them, as it were. So that is like one side of what might happen. And on the other side, what often happens is we are pushing them away and not wanting to experience them. Just sort of like out of the way, or wanting to kind of wishing them away, even hating them. I mean, it happens to us, doesn't it? It's just like sometimes we feel so awful that we just like hate it to feel like that, and that actually kind of makes it a bit worse. But so here we are. So that's so what I'm proposing here isn't easy at all, but it is something that we can train ourselves to do. So the in-between space that I've called the middle way is we're still experiencing emotion, we're being with it, we're witnessing it, we're with it, as it were, in this kind of, with respect and curiosity and kindness, but we're not sort of being taken away by them, nor are we trying to push them away, if that makes some sort of sense. And I'm just really saying that what I'm proposing here isn't easy at all, and I think we know it is. all of us have been in incredibly difficult states that were just so hard to bear. So I'm not saying this is easy, but what I am saying is that this is like a way out, as it were. This is like pointing at the way out, or middle way, in a sense of like we need to start working in this particular space to find that a way back to that openness, to that sky, if that makes sense. So to train ourselves to be with the emotion and being aware of them, not pushing them away, not getting entangled in it. And I think that's where we are sort of, this is balancing act, as it were. This is where we find ourselves time and again, and knowing at some point we're completely sort of taken away by the emotion. The emotion has just got us completely, if you just, we're completely sort of, yeah, it's completely affecting us. We can't help it. Obviously we can't help it, but what we can do is start noticing that, even noticing that has happened, and bringing ourselves back to being mindful, at least, of the emotion, and getting this sense of turning towards it. Yeah, so that's what I call middle way, for the sake of this plan that we're having to befriend our emotions. Yeah, so let's just not get overwhelmed or wallow in our emotion. But if we do find ourselves overwhelmed and wallowing, I mean, let's not kind of be unkind to ourselves, because this is just happening. This is the nature of it. This is the nature of the whole thing. It will kind of take us with us. It will just sort of, this is the hallmark, you could say, of the difficult emotion. There is hardly any possibility for us being aware in that state. So it is hard. It isn't easy. So we need to train ourselves to bring more awareness into something that habitually doesn't have that awareness in it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Oh, thank you. I see a few nods, few thumbs up, so that's encouraging. Sometimes in these sessions, like, I know I've been speaking to you like for an hour, and I'm like, here, it feels like I'm talking to myself because you're there behind your mute buttons. But anyway, this is our reality right now, and we will have an opportunity to speak with each other after the break. So this is what I'm proposing now, to have a break and to make ourselves a cup of tea. And then whilst you're having the break, you could still sort of mull over, and you know, if you do have any questions, do please write them down somehow. And obviously there will be an opportunity for you to ask any questions that have come out, but maybe we can keep, oh, thank you, Anne. Just keep a bit of that awareness going, and a sense of exploring our emotional space. And you know, even if you find yourself at the moment like completely miserable, it might still be really interesting to just turn towards that and feel that. How does that feel? How does that feel? And where do you feel it in the body? So we could still do a bit of that as we're having our break. And then let's come back in 10 minutes. Is that okay? A 10-minute break? Yeah, enough for making a cup of tea, I guess, not drinking it. Yeah. Okay, let's come back in 10 minutes, which is 20 to the whole hour. Yeah. See you in a bit. Well, welcome back, everyone. I've got this big glass of tea, which is not going to be drinkable in the next, yeah, because it needs to cool off. But hey, yeah, I think most of us are here back again by the looks of it. And obviously, if you don't want to have your video on, that's also fine. But I know some of you are not yet back, but we'll see. I've also resumed the recording. I won't be using the visual, the video recording at all, but I'll only use my own speech, as it were. So hopefully that helps. Yes, so in terms of our work with the difficult emotion, so that's the first thing that we need to do, really, is to not being sort of taken away by them, but just staying with them, as it were. So the word we could use for this particular stage of us working with the difficult emotion is to stop. And what we mean by stop is that we're not following the usual habitual path of the emotion that hasn't helped us in the past. So this is easier said than done, but it is definitely something that we could teach ourselves to do. We could train ourselves to do this. So it doesn't mean that we're not going to have emotions. We're always going to have emotions, aren't we? But it just means that you're trying to notice there's an emotion going on, which is a really big step, I think. And then when we're noticing the difficult emotion particularly is going on, just we're trying to not allow it to spill over, as it were, into whatever it habitually wants to do. Anyway, I said it before, this is more easily said than done, but this is somewhere this is as a guideline, as it were, of that particular phase of our work with the emotions. And I think we need to come back to this level of work time and again, time and again, time and again, time and again, and that's how we train ourselves. So not following the habitual pattern of the emotions. Again, I think it's the third time I'm saying it. I know from my own experience that is so much more easy to say it than to do it. But here is our work cut out for us, isn't it? So, and a really good place to go with this. A really good place to do this stopping, as it were, or the being present with the emotion is the body. And I think all of us know that it's incredibly important in the meditation, all the work we are doing as a Buddhist practitioner, that it's incredibly important to have awareness of body. Now, with our work with emotion, the invitation is to feel the emotion in the body. So the idea is that every emotion will always have some sort of imprint on the body. And I'm just wanting to sort of track myself back here, because I wanted to say this is us and our difficult emotions, our kleshas, as it were. So the positive emotions aren't a problem, is it? It's just not a problem. So we don't particularly need to do the work with this. We're really trying to apply this to the difficult emotions when we notice they're arising. So to do it, to feel it completely in the body, the difficult emotion. And the thought there is that there is something there in terms of that we can feel the emotional imprint or resonance in the body, but we're learning that this is the case, that we can feel some sort of resonance in the body of the difficult emotion. So here is some sort of anchor point for us to come back to time and again, to train ourselves to feel that emotion in the body. And through feeling the emotion in the body, we're also sort of telling ourselves, like, yes, this is what I'm feeling, and we're acknowledging it as well, that this is what's actually happening. A lot of the time when we are in a difficult emotion, we're kind of involved in thoughts and thinking. Maybe our thoughts are even racing, particularly when it's a very strong, like anger or irritation or anxiety. There's just like lots of thoughts going on, isn't there? And so to track back to the body and to feel the emotion in the body. That is a way of stopping it. We also need to pay attention to any thoughts, but this is our anchor point, as it were, to train ourselves to feel the difficult emotion in the body. Still very unpleasant at times, but a really good way of proceeding. So I thought we could just maybe I'll just ask you if you would feel in the body, where would you feel, let's say, irritation in the body? So just in mind, I don't want you to get irritated, but just as some sort of example, just empathize with that if you can. Sometimes you can't do that, but if you would sort of imagine that sense of irritation, where would you feel it in the body? And could people, if they have found some location in the body, put them in the chat. Anywhere in the body that you feel would feel irritation. Would be really interesting to hear. Shoulder. Wow, we've got a lot of shoulders here. That's so interesting, isn't it? Shoulder, shoulder, stomach, shoulder, belly, chest, jaw, the hands, the chest, the upper chest, the bottom of the throat, the bridge of the nose, the jaw, the chest, the shoulders, the temples. I don't know what half is, but that's probably autocorrect somewhere. The chest. Isn't that incredible? The jaw. So yeah, you got that. So anyway, shoulders, throat. Oh, well, that's so interesting. The tightness around the heart. Isn't that lovely? I mean, I know that isn't pleasant, but isn't that lovely that we're all kind of responding to this? And a lot of us, oh yeah, okay. And not quite relating to it right now. Yeah, well, that's, I understand. Yeah, chest and throat. Okay, thank you. So let's just sort of leave it at that, unless you really want to put yours in if we haven't read it yet. But so I find that incredibly interesting. That, well, everybody or most people seem to have some sort of resonance, but let's just otherwise just take this as evidence that a lot of people feel that resonance in the body. Now another one, you know, we don't want to kind of only focus on the difficult ones, don't we? So let's just say, how about joy? Can we just find in the body if we would feel joy? We just have to channel some joy here. Might not be possible, but maybe it is. Where do we feel joy? Heart, face, the left rib, oh nice. The chest, the heart and the face, also the jaw, the heart, the mouth, the chest, the heart, the chest, the open arms. Oh, that's lovely, isn't it? That's a lovely sort of image. I like that. The back of the head. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. The heart. The raising through the body. Okay, there is some sort of like movement there of joy. The lightness, the stomach, the face, and the lightness. How lovely. So anyway, stomach and chest. So you see, if we do this, we find something, don't we? We do find a location. Isn't this evidence that we found some? Well, we're not the only ones. I'll share with you an image of, maybe some of you know it, I don't know, but this is some research that has been done by a Finnish group of researchers, and I'll send you a link tomorrow. And so they basically ask loads of people across all sorts of cultures. So this is not cultural. You could say this is more widely human. We don't have our Western lens on it when we experience this. So they've asked all these people to describe in the body when they feel these particular emotions. So I'm going to share my screen here with you. We talked about earlier, a lot of people said shoulders, didn't they? So let's say anger. That's on the top of my screen, the top left. We've got anger, and then we see that the brighter areas is all the areas where people feel activity increasing, as it were. So a lot of you said shoulders, and so it was a lot of upper body, wasn't it? And hands, I think somebody said as well. So that is most people seem to feel anger, like they feel this sort of more activity coming up in the top half of the body. And then we also had joy, and I can't see my top bar, so if it isn't a top bar, I apologize, but I'll just take love for that, for the purpose of something that's fairly similar. So love, you see it as well, that we had a lot more heart and belly, didn't we? And some sort of openness. So you just see there's more activity there. And then when you look at the blue, it's when people feel the amount of energy is sort of dwindling, as it were. So it's decreasing, so you feel less there. So it might be like a sense of heaviness. And I think sometimes we might feel that, particularly with depression, don't we? Which is this feeling like the body is heavy and so it's, anyway, I thought that was just interesting to show you. So yeah, that's my story. That was, I'll send a link to you tomorrow so you can study at leisure. But just as to illustrate that this is what human beings generally agree on, that emotion is felt in the body, is felt in different places. So this is what I encourage us to do, when the difficult emotion arises, to start sensing it, start feeling it in the body, start exploring it. And this is a way to stop it spilling over, if that makes sense at all. So this is a really good step to start with our training with the difficult emotion. So, and also you have thoughts associated with your difficult emotion. So that's another thing we're going to pay attention to in our own sort of, hopefully, if you take up the invitation in the work with the difficult emotions, so start paying more attention to, okay, here it is in the body. Once you've found it, you're feeling it in the body, you might also want to start flagging what are the kind of thoughts that are going on right now. There might be images. And also another thing to flag, another thing to train yourself to do is, when the difficult emotion arises, how is my breath now? So that might be another way of doing it. So we've got the body, which is our basic place to go to. And then we've got the thoughts and maybe any images, and also the breath, just to explore this. And to bring our mindfulness to it. Okay, how does that sound? Sounds okay. This actually is all I had to say about this particular bit, because what I thought we'd do right now is I'll put you into breakout groups, and the invitation is really to, just to talk about the topic, obviously, what we've been talking about so far. But it would also be really good to talk to each other about, how do you do this? How do you do this stopping, as it were? If there is a really difficult emotion going on for you, what has worked for you as a strategy to stop, as what we described, stop? So not suppressing it, but somehow to kind of prevent the difficult emotion from doing its habitual thing that isn't that helpful.